I'm Josh Linton. As I've been up here staring at these lights, I thought, I do not stand in front of spotlights that often. And I thought, why don't I do that? And then I remembered, it's the reflection of the head that really is it's not flattering. So I apologize for anybody who has to deal with that in your eyes. But I'm glad to be here, Josh Linton, with Valcom, and really want to talk about some strategies for cybersecurity. But I wanted to start out with a story. About 5 years ago, I got a call from a CEO, and he's in a panic. He had just seen a check try to clear in his bank account for $50,000. And normally you don't want a check to bounce. This one did. He only had about $40,000 in his bank. He had recently, within kind of a week of that, had just withdrawn about $30,000 to get him below the 50. And he says, the problem is I didn't write this check. And I don't know how anybody got into my bank account to do this. So we started to do a little bit of research, and so I'm asking him, I said, what other computers do you use? Do you log into your bank account from your phone? And he says, no, I have my laptop, and that's it, right? All I do is I log in from my laptop. I don't even log in from my phone. I don't share it with anybody. And so I'm trying to figure out if somebody's got a keylogger, how are they accessing this information, right? And then I ask if he keeps his passwords anywhere. Now, this is an older gentleman, so I was thinking that he might keep them on a Post-it note under his keyboard. For good or bad, he didn't. It would have been better in this case, but he was keeping them on a note on his phone, right? And his phone was pretty private, but this note was syncing to his Office 365 account, right? And as I did not figure it out this fast, for the record. It took me a little longer than that. But as we kind of did some research, turns out about 3 weeks prior to this, he had received an email with a shared document, and he had clicked on it, put his credentials in, and immediately recognized that it was fraudulent. So he called the help desk and got his password changed. So he was compromised for maybe 10 minutes, right? In those 10 minutes, the bad actors were able to download enough data that they quickly identified his notes with his passwords and had logged into his bank account, created a new bill pay recipient, and had written themselves a check. And if he had luckily withdrawn some of that money from that account, he would have lost that. This was 4 years ago. Interesting part is, different CEO. I got a very similar call just 2 months ago. Somebody had sent an email to their customer from their email domain, asking them to change where they sent their multiple $100,000 payment, right? At that point, in many of these cases, you're hoping your business can survive some of these things, right? I'm probably not sharing anything you don't know, but everyone, it's serious business. Everyone's a target, whether it's a business, personal, and as we talk today about these cybersecurity strategies, it really is your data, your business that is the key to your success as businesses. So one thing that I wanted to kind of get by raise of hands, who here is in leadership positions? Raise of hands. Okay. Sysadmins, kind of admin positions. And then I know there's lots of students. How many? We have some students in this session? Nope. One. That's good. Kind of students. That's fair, right? My wife's a student. She's going back to school. She will not be here though. She's a nurse. Different program. What we want to talk about are 8 strategies for preparing your company for a cybersecurity attack. And we'll talk about these in priority, but really the trick with cybersecurity is, in many cases, it's not about if there's going to be a breach or some sort of security incident. It's about when, right? And so having a strategy for protecting your business is probably, it's the best you can do. A determined criminal is probably going to get in anyway, right? We just don't want to make it easy for them, right? So as we talk about this, we'll use this acronym SAFE PACE. We'll go through each of these: security, availability, flexibility, and extensibility, and then policy, audit, compliance, and education. We'll talk a little bit about each of these and how they might apply to your business. So let's start first with security. This one may be the most basic, and at a security conference may not need to be said, but we're going to say it anyway, right? And that is, you have to take a secure approach, securing your devices, securing your network access, physical security. All of these things are so important, and making sure that you are setting yourself up for success in this area. All right, one of the big challenges, and maybe you don't want to raise your hands here, but how many of you have dealt with a ransomware attack from someone else, right? No, yeah, don't raise your hands. We deal with them all the time. We will typically have, I'll bet we get a call a month from a different customer. Earlier in the year, I feel like we were getting them almost every week with somebody having a ransomware incident, and they're trying to recover their data or trying to determine whether or not they want to pay the ransom, try to recover. The FBI says don't pay, because every time we pay them, we just kind of, the cycle continues. They make money, they do it again, they do a better job next time, right? And this security and preparing is really the very beginning of a journey to secure your environment. And so you'll want, sorry, I was one slide behind there. Veeam polled 1,000 IT companies, all of them who had had a cybersecurity incident. 73% of them in 2021 had 2 or more incidents of ransomware, right? 68% of those, their backups were also compromised. Now, that's a major problem. Anybody who's experienced ransomware, the really good bad actors, they're going to wait until they have access to your backup data, because then they know you have to pay, right? Without a good way to recover from ransomware, paying that ransom may be the only way that you can keep your business in business, right? And so, and then 32% of those that paid the ransom were not able to get all of their data back. So it's, and ransomware is just one example, maybe one of the most prolific right now, but it's a major issue. And so you need to be prepared for ransomware. And this is one of the things that I want you to take away. If there's one thing you take away from this, are these questions, right? To ask yourself and then to ask your team. And our marketing team did a great job. They actually created some PDFs, 2 PDFs, one for you as a leader and one for your team. And at the end, I'll put a link. You can download those and take them back and ask your team these questions and compare them. And that's really the key, right? How confident am I that my system is secure, that current threats are prevented? How confident am I that if there is a security breach, that we can rapidly recover and mitigate any damage? How confident am I that my team knows what they need to do in order to provide ongoing security for our critical systems, right? And then as you ask your team these same things, right, that, I think, is where you will see a lot of areas for improvement, where there's a discrepancy between what you believe is happening and what your team believes is happening, right? And you rank that on a scale of 1 to 10, and now you have an opportunity to go and start making some improvements in your security policy and procedures. Now, if you have questions throughout this, I will not take the full 45 minutes. So if you have a question, raise your hand. I can address it now, or we can do it at the end, whatever feels most relevant for the question. So Next, let's talk about availability. Prior to COVID, at our office, we might have had 25% of our employees that had kind of VPN and remote access to the data. Prior to COVID, 100% of our employees can work part-time, at least part of the time from home, right? This availability requirement is key. It has been for some people for a long time. For us, COVID forced it on us. And now that data needs to be available 24/7 to all of our employees, right? And one of the things to consider in availability is what it costs you in downtime, right? And one of the things I'm always wary of in presentations is what I like to call marketing math. That is, if you buy my product, you're going to save $1 million, that whole thing. At some level, it's probably true, right? But for each of you, as you take these numbers, and this is why we kind of did it this way, is that you just take your annual revenue and you divide it by the number of hours. If you're a 24/7 operation, that's 8760. And if you're an 8x5 operation, it's 2080. That gives you your revenue per hour that would be a potential loss in revenue for downtime. So for example, a $100 million company that is 8x5, if 10 hours of downtime costs them $480,000 in revenue, right? And so as you calculate this, that doesn't take into account lost productivity or redirected resources as you're trying to resolve these types of situations, right? So the availability isn't just something to help the company grow, but it costs money, right? And unplanned downtime really becomes something that's not an acceptable situation for most companies. For us, one thing that we learned quickly, this was prior to COVID, we got a call. In fact, it wasn't a call. The fire department came into our building and they said, you need to get everybody out of here. And we said, is there a fire? They said, oh no, but there could be. There's a gas leak right outside your building and everyone has to leave until the gas company can come fix it and then we can clear the building. You would think that would be fast. It was not. And for me, well, for any of you, I imagine, when there's an issue, you jump on these things right away. It took about, I think it was 24 or 48 hours before we could bring everybody back into our building. Well, during that time, we only had 25% of our employees that were able to continue to work, right? The amount of lost productivity that cost us, as well as the challenges when everybody came back trying to get caught up, right? Is kind of a recipe for additional errors, rushing through some of these things, right? So availability becomes an important part of your overall plan. And that's really if you don't have one additional thing that you'll want to think about is a business continuity plan. How many of you know what a tabletop exercise is? Yeah? If you're not doing those regularly, you need to be. That's an area in which, as you build your business continuity plan and you can kind of run through that exercise and say, okay, what are we going to do when there's a gas leak? Or what do we do if there's a fire or an earthquake? And you can run through those scenarios to make sure that you're addressing the issues that might be part of your organization, but that you're prepared for those issues as well, right? And that your environment is prepared. And we're back to these questions, right? How confident are you that your IT system will remain up and available regardless of what might happen, right? How confident am I that my system goes down from a technical failure, disaster, or breach, that my team can get it operational before it impacts the business? And then for your team, these same questions, right? Be interesting to see if these are different for your organization. Flexibility. How many of you, well, you don't have to answer this question. If you've been in this in IT for maybe longer than 10 or 15 years, I remember the time when we did not have to be flexible. The IT director said, here's how it's going to be, and you're going to do it my way, and that's pretty much how it goes. That's how we maintain security around here, right? No, you can't have an iPad. It's not secure. No, you can have one computer only. Well, that is not the case anymore, right? Most users have 2, 3 plus devices. We can't control that, right? We have to be flexible, and we have to be prepared to adapt to the needs of our users, right? I call them our customers, our internal customers, right? That's who we're supporting. One of the challenges with this is also shadow IT. How many of you are dealing with shadow IT? Yeah. Our marketing director might be in this room. And so I'm going to take a little risk here and share a story. This is a number of years ago, I'm talking to our CEO, and I said, we've got a problem with kind of shadow IT, people go out and buying tools and software that we can't maintain. And he says, well, why does that matter? So, well, because they bring it in, and now there's a whole other vector attack from a security perspective. There's other issues too, but from a security perspective, here's an attack vector that I don't even know about, right? So how am I going to be able to, it takes me longer to remedy whatever situation might occur. And he says, well, give me an example. I said, well, the marketing department just got a new project management software. He says, I'll talk to them about it. So he's talking to the marketing director, and she says, oh, we don't do that. What do you mean? We don't do shadow IT. He says, well, did you get a new project management software? She says, oh, yeah, we did. Oh, yeah, I guess that is shadow IT. The thing that clicked for me is she didn't even realize what she was doing. It was so easy for her and her team to say, hey, we need project management. And I can go get it for $5 a month. I'm just going to do that. I'm going to put it on my card, and I'm off and running, right? As an IT organization, those things, they needed that. We were not prepared to offer it, right? And so we either have to, from a flexibility perspective, we need to be prepared to offer the tools that they need, or we need to have in place methods for them to get those tools and to let us know so that we can then secure them and put them into the fold, if you will, of the tools and the security posture that we're preparing for. So, similar questions. How confident am I that my IT team can rapidly respond to the changing needs of my team? How confident am I that my system is flexible enough to accommodate new tools, new systems, and new data sources? And then ask your team the same thing, right? How confident are you that we can accommodate next generation business systems and tools that our teams need to remain competitive? That's what they're doing. As upset as I want to be with the marketing team, they're doing what they need to do to be the best at what they do. And that's what's changed between now and 10 or 15 years ago, when the IT department and the IT leaders could say, you've got to do it my way or we can't get it done. That has changed. And we're saying, we are going to provide what you need so you can get your job the best way possible so that we can grow our business, so that we can be the best that we can be. And then at the end, extensibility. This is one of those big words that we put in here because everyone's using it. And because it works into our acronym. This is about scalability, right? This is about being able to grow quickly. To me, one of the best examples of this is if you are part of a company whose growth strategy is around mergers and acquisitions, right? You could overnight double the size of your business if you go merge a company about the same size as yours. So why is that important, especially from a security perspective, that you're prepared for this, right? Rapid growth requires new technology, new tools, tools you've never even heard of because you acquired somebody that was, who knows what they were doing, right, on their IT in their IT department. The reality is over time, if we don't have a plan for scalability and extensibility, we end up with a patchwork of tools. They don't work together. It becomes really difficult to manage the security, right? If you've got 10 tools or 100, obviously 100 is going to be harder to manage. And so having a plan around scalability is important whether it's from mergers, whether it's just you're a startup and your growth is exponential, right? If you're not prepared for that type of growth, you end up having lots of holes, right? You're just plugging these things in, and you'd hate to have to fix all of that because of a breach, right? Having that security plan and saying, you know what, we're going to put in place internal tools, processes, so that we can be prepared for that growth. And that's what extensibility is about. Same questions, or similar, right? Is my system extensible enough to accommodate new tools? How confident are we that we can keep up with the growth in our company, right? There are not too many companies that don't want to grow, right? If you're a public company, it's the only thing that matters. But that growth is coming, and we need to be prepared for it. So, safe. And now we're going to move on to PACE. Policy, audit, compliance, and education. How many of you have documented security policy? Most? Half, maybe? That's where we're going to start. I was having our VP of cybersecurity review this. I wanted to make sure I wasn't telling you stories that aren't true. And one of his notes as he was reading through this on this section was, well, you can't have a policy without auditing. Lucky for me, audit's the second one, right? And that really is, know that you can do these in order of priority, but you cannot stop. If you stop at just having a policy, it will ultimately fail, right? And so let's talk about policy. We had a customer, and this is a story maybe a little about policy. Well, we had a customer, and they had a patching policy. And their patching policy was, we will patch every 270 days. We think that's plenty, right? One of the things with policy that you want to make sure you do, you need to have it reviewed, both internally and externally. Get some separate set of eyes on it, because 270 days is not enough, right? And sure enough, they ended up having a breach because of a vulnerability in one of their systems that had gone unpatched, right? So it's an example of having a policy and then not having it up to speed, not reviewing it often enough, and not making sure that it meets the requirements, whether those are, many of you may be regulated in some form or fashion, whether it's government or finance, PCI, right? Lots of areas that have certain policy requirements, right? Those of you who may not be regulated, it's really hard to get to a point of good security without having some level of policy, right? These are some of the questions that are most important. Who is responsible for keeping the policy updated? And I love this next one. Are they the right person for this role? Right? And if you go to the other one, this is one that I imagine would happen at our organization. Not at ours, some other organization, I'm sure. I think that it's supposed to be one person, and then when I ask that person, they think it should be someone else, right? This is clearly not going to be ideal for keeping our policy updated if we're not clear on where we need to be. You know, when was the last time we reviewed the policy? Does the policy include how often it should be reviewed, right? When was the last time we had our policy reviewed by a third party, right? And this clarification, with expertise in security policy. Our marketing director is awesome. Probably not the right person to review your security policy. I should not pick on her. I'm going to be in trouble. And then ask your team the same thing, right? Audit. Audits can be expensive, and they're typically not fun, whether that's an IRS audit or a security audit, right? The goal of an audit is to show us where we are lacking, where we're missing the boat on our policy, right? How are you auditing these tools? And you really want to do it in a way that is automated, right? How do you know when somebody logs in to from the wireless or from wired? You know, are they logging in from when and where they're supposed to? Do they have new devices, right? I think this probably doesn't happen a lot of times, but your executives go to an event and they all get new iPads, right? They bring them in, they connect to the Wi-Fi. How are you making sure that those, and you're auditing to make sure those new devices are following the policies that you've put in place for those devices, right? Do you know that they have new devices on the network? These are all come into play in terms of making sure that that policy that you've put in place is being audited, that you know what's happening in your environment and on your devices and your users, right? We haven't talked about users a lot because I think they are the problem. Let's be honest, right? I mean, we love them, we support them. At the end of the day, and we're going to get to education here in a second, that's when we'll talk about our users. At the end of the day, a lot of this is in place because as human beings, we make mistakes, right? And in fact, I was down in St. George this week meeting with a customer, and they have a policy. This was, they do a kind of a phishing test. How many of you do kind of an email phishing test on a regular basis, right? Does anybody do it more than once a month? A couple of you, yeah. This company does it twice a month. And if somebody kind of clicks the link 2 times in a 6-month period, they get written up and have to meet with the IT director and their boss. And if they do it a 3rd time, they have to meet with the CEO. And basically they're saying, if you can't learn or you can't pay enough attention, you are becoming a risk to our business, one that we may not be prepared to keep on board.
What if your CEO is the culprit?
Hey, good luck. Question?
Does that create a culture of fear?
I think it could. If you met this gentleman, I don't think you would think that. He's about the kindest man I've ever met. I think that as they talked about it and the way that I heard it is kind of like, wow, that is really strict. The way he presented it was much more, hey, we sit down with them, we talk to them, we want to understand, like, were they just not paying attention? And so I did feel like the way that they had presented it was a much kinder than what I kind of, and for those of you who didn't hear that, he said, doesn't that create a culture of fear, right? And the first one was, what if it is your CEO? Just see if you couldn't hear back there. But so I think it's a really good point, and I think for them it was about their approach of that correction to kind of balance out. Like he didn't say you do it 3 times and you're fired, but I think it was very clear. Like this is serious business, So good point. How you do that can be critical. Yeah, he mentioned just about Snow having a presentation on Tuesday about creating a culture of security. And as you create that culture, it kind of shifts probably from fear, I'm paraphrasing, but kind of shifts from fear to kind of this is important, rather than don't do this or you're fired. And I certainly felt that from him. But it was the first time I'd heard of kind of this pretty, it's serious. You're going to meet with the CEO if you don't understand what's going on here. So, great comments. Thank you. This is for audit. Those are some of the things. So here's some of the questions to ask yourself. Who's responsible for policy and implementation audits? How do we audit the implementation of our security policy? And what is our exposure if we don't do this? I think this refers a lot to governmental regulations, right? Most of them require you to have a policy, and they will also require a certain level of auditing. So where do you fit into that, right? And then asking your team really these same questions with one additional that says, how much of it is audited, right? It would be impossible to manually audit everything that's going on, right? And so automating that and getting the alerts that you need in order to know, hey, we've got a new device on here. We've got a device that's just joined the network that doesn't have the security controls in place that we require. How are we going to address that? And then compliance, right? This is about making sure that our people are complying. One example that we have a policy that you can't access our tools in our environment unless you're in the United States. We're a local company. You really don't, nobody from Europe is going to be logging in to our systems, right? Causes some problems with some of our people when they travel and they're on vacation and they now want to notify us and that they're on vacation and they want to work. We usually let them, but they have to figure out a way to tell us. I mean, they can't Teams us because they can't log in. They can't email us because they can't log in. Luckily, we like them, and for the most part, they have our cell phone numbers. But this is one of those areas where forcing that compliance becomes important, right? In one way or another, creating those parameters that say, we're going to make sure that our human beings, our users, are complying. And when they don't, we want to know about it. And that's part of creating that kind of that full circle, right? Policy, audit, compliance. And then some questions around compliance here. I think the same question, who's responsible for it, right? If nobody's responsible, nobody's doing it. Well, you probably are. Whether you want to be or not, you are probably the one in charge. And whether that makes the most sense or not, I think is a really good conversation to be having. What is the potential for non-compliance? How do we monitor and mediate that compliance, right? As we talk about this, one of the things I haven't mentioned and around this is really around bad publicity, right? I mean, if we're not prepared and we have a breach and we were compliant or we're doing everything we're supposed to, you can really mitigate the bad publicity and the negative impact that it might have in the public space, right, in the public arena. Where if you're non-compliant, I mean, it can be career ending or business ending, right? And so making sure that you understand what does that look like? What will happen if we're not compliant with what we've agreed to do, right? Back to this policy of 270 days of patching, at least they were compliant with their policy, even if their policy was bad. There is some strength in complying with your policy, even if it's not that good, right? So make sure you have that as part of what you're doing. And then education. I'm sure that those of you, we talked a little bit about doing phishing tests, right? Doing annual or more often security training. I don't know how many of you know what we do at Valcom. We're a cybersecurity kind of reseller. So one of the things that we are getting all the time is people are always trying to buy stuff from us that are from that are princes in Africa, for example, right? And they have gotten, I mean, that was 20 years ago. They have gotten very, very sophisticated. And I'll bet that we have at least a handful of emails every single week that we send out and say, this is a fraudulent email. Do not respond to this. They do not want to buy 100 laptops, we promise, right? And the reality is that for our sales team, they're doing training every quarter because we do not want them to get complacent around looking for these types of things. For many of the other people in our organization, we do it annually, and that's typically sufficient, right? And so for your organizations, I think this is one of those areas where for a lot of compliance requirements, governmental, et cetera, you're required to do training once a year, for example, right? That may not be enough. And really asking yourself these same questions of, how security conscious is your team? Are you checking on the security posture of your vendors and your partners? This is something that's new for us in the last maybe 2 or 3 years. The number of partners, both customers and vendor partners, who are sending us and saying, tell us about your security policy. Share it with us. Can you show us that you are auditing and complying with your own policy? Because in order for us to do business with you on an ongoing basis, we need to know that you're doing the things. So it's not just the government, right? It's our partners that are asking us the same thing. That's something to consider. Are you doing that? What is your education in place, and when was it last updated? That's an important question too. You want to make sure you're not training things that are old. Make sure you're updating it. We all here know how quickly things change in technology, and cybersecurity is probably fastest of all. We need to be updating our training curriculum, if you want to call it, so that everybody's getting that updated training. And then what routines do we have in place? We touched on that a little bit. And then ask your team on a scale of 1 to 10, how security conscious is your team, right? Ask them, how security conscious do they think the employees are, or your customers, or your end users, right? How can you increase that number? Just by one. Just take it one step at a time. 1%. How can we be 1% more security conscious? And if you can take that a little bit better at a time, you'll continually improve what you're doing. The thing that I would add to this, for those of you in leadership positions as well, make sure that your team, your administrators are also getting the education they need. Obviously, you're here, right? I imagine a lot of your teams are here. This is so important for them to see and understand what's out there, right? And to be prepared for those types of things. So, just a quick review. Safe pace, secure, accessible, flexible, and extensible. Policy, audit, compliance, and education. Again, number one takeaway, get this assessment, right? Take a picture of this. I think these are all available anyway, but this is available right now, and you can download it. As I was talking to our marketing director, I said, well, let's just create a form they can fill out. Well, I promise we won't gather their data. And then right? Thank you. And none of them will believe us, even if we're being honest about it. And you shouldn't. We think we're honest, but when I'm talking to a group of security experts, right? So this is a PDF. You can download it. There's no, you don't have to give us your email address or anything to get this. It's just free. And if you want to share with us any feedback on it, we'd love to hear. We do have our contact information on that. We do have a team of really good cybersecurity engineers that would be more than happy to talk to you about it if you have questions, but feel free to use it. And if it's valuable, please let us know. And thank you all for joining us today. It's been a pleasure, and for being here. We've got a question right back here. Yes. With our customers' business executives, or with our own internal executives? Yeah. It has been somewhat difficult. It's easiest after they've had a breach. That's when it's really easy, unfortunately. Right? And one of the reasons that we did this presentation is for them, right? We want the executives to know that this is, it's not a, please be prepared, don't wait for it to happen. And in my opinion, it's a lot about education. And I'm going to call out Philip. Philip, will you raise your hand right here? This is our VP of Cybersecurity. He'll probably have some better input if you want to sync up with him about the conversations that he's had. He's having those direct conversations with the executives of our customers. And I know that he has them before they have a breach. And I think he can talk very specifically about how we're getting that message across. He's way better at it than I am. I don't know why I'm doing the presentation. He probably should have done it. But actually, part of that is that I can kind of sell Valcom and I can talk about some of these things. Philip is really good about just understanding what our customers are needing and how we can help them, what they need to do next in their security journey. And so I think that's where his strengths really are. So thank you, great question. Any other questions? And you don't have to stay for the questions, but you're welcome to stay or check with me after, either way, or ask Philip. So, okay, thank you so much. Appreciate